millennials can't afford homes because we're eating too much avocado toast.
There's a sense of don't California my Florida, and Florida's full, stay out. And I think the reality is you can't stop people from moving to a certain place, but you can certainly manage the growth.
The problems of San Francisco are here. The city of Tampa was run by the white Municipal Party of Tampa. We were a majority minority city, but we disenfranchised enough people so that we had a party literally called the white Municipal Party of Tampa. No, that's not a joke. Look it up.
We'll go ahead and start. TBD, I don't know what episode this is. You might be 50, which is insane.
That's a lot.
So we are here with Nathan. What is your last name?
Hagen.
Hagen. Nathan Hagen. And a lot of people know what NIMBY is, right? Not in my backyard. But Nathan represents a chapter of the YIMBY. So what is a YIMBY?
Sure. So YIMBY stands for Yes in My Backyard. I mean, you can think if you go back and do some archaeology, I think we have you can trace back our organization 9 years maybe. Started in California in reaction to kind of a classic trope about how millennials can't afford homes because we're eating too much avocado toast. And, so you'll see if you look around for, so we're a chapter of a group called YIMBY Action, which is, again, started in California in that era where that was kind of a meme about millennials, is that we had too much avocado toast and we couldn't afford housing because of that. And the reaction sort of where our movement came out of was people telling us that there was plenty of housing and we shouldn't build more. And that we should just say no to more development because it's, there's all these perceived negative externalities associated with it. And some people got fed up. They got fed up with the city politics in San Francisco that made it impossible to build housing for an entire generation of people who had just, graduated college during the Great Recession. And people wanted to say yes. I mean, young people in San Francisco in particular is where we started, wanted to say yes to more housing instead of no, because they needed a place to live and they were just tired of being pushed out of the city and not having a voice. So our chapter locally is YIMBY Tampa, so we have our own chapter name, but our parent organization is YIMBY Action. We're a 501c4. That means we are nonprofit or volunteer driven, but we're action oriented. So because we're a 501c4, we can volunteer for candidates. We can endorse. We can lobby people directly to affect change on our issues. And in the city of Tampa, I have my own personal story for how I got into this. But in the city of Tampa, we have a unique history. Everywhere has a unique history, but we're seeing the same pattern here that we have seen in many other places. I tell people all the time. Florida and the city of Tampa, really, they're like, don't California my Florida. We hear that a lot in the last couple of years. Florida is the same thing as California. We're just 30 years behind.
Right.
We have the same policies on housing that California had 30 years ago. We have the same growth that California had 30 years ago. We're just behind.
Right.
It's not that we have invented some solution that's going to make it so we don't have all the problems that people deal with in California. We see homelessness going up already in the city of Tampa and Hillsborough County. We already see that people can't afford to live here. The problems of San Francisco are here. And so our group is really thinking about what are the problems that in other places that have been dealing with housing affordability issues for the last 20 years, what changes can we make? And so we think that one of the key pieces, and there are other people working on housing affordability that need credit. I mean, East Tampa, that housing affordability has been a problem in East Tampa for decades. And that's kind of a more important struggle, and our angle is not separate from that, but it's how we talk about policy is a little bit different because we're talking about different levers and different mechanisms for change. But we're part of a broader housing justice and housing affordability movement in the country and in the city of Tampa. But our angle is really about how can we leverage the word yes,
right,
to address the challenges that we're facing.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree. I think what's happening here happened in California. I mean, they've had this insane bull run of growth for decades. And look what it turned into. The last time I was in California was pre-COVID. I'm sure it's gotten worse. I've heard it's gotten worse. I've seen it's gotten worse through videos and stuff online. But it's a beautiful place, right? Incredible weather, amazing enterprise, restaurants, shops, etc. The thing about, I was in LA and the sprawl of that city's unbelievable.
Yeah.
When I came back, I was talking to my dad. He had never been to LA. And I described it like, I said, Dad, imagine if you took Tampa Bay, drained it, filled it with concrete, and added a street grid. Like, that's the scale, probably even smaller.
Yeah, I would say it's bigger than that.
Than LA. Just an idea to imagine the scale of that city. And it's not to say that that exact same scale is going to happen here, but I believe you're right. We are on this incredible growth pattern. Every metric shows people are going to be moving here across the country for probably the rest of our lives. So there's a sense of don't California my Florida, and Florida's full, stay out, and maybe we need to put border patrol on the Florida-Georgia border, all this sort of fun stuff. But I think the reality is you can't stop people from moving to a certain place, but you can certainly manage the growth.
Yeah. You know what you also can't stop is people growing up in a place.
Right.
People are going to have kids. I grew up in Tampa. My mom's side of the family's been here for generations. I'm affected.
What was your mom's maiden name?
Wadsworth.
Wadsworth? Mm-hmm. Where were they from originally?
Seminole Heights area.
Seminole Heights, and then before that, like what country did you guys immigrate from?
Well, it's been my mom's side of the family's. My grandma's got the genealogy done, and
cool.
it's all.
All over the place.
What white person is really can really say where they're from.
That's true. I guess.
Yeah, I don't identify. I guess I'll say.
Okay.
I'm an American.
Yeah. It's just fascinating to me because back in the day there were certain numbers of groups of specific demographics, like the Cubans, the Italians, the Spanish, the Germans.
In the Tampa context, I think I can answer that question.
Yeah.
It's just white. My granddad, I think he was technically born in a small town in Central Florida, south of here.
Okay.
And he moved here. I think they maybe had some family connections here already. And then my grandmother's family owned a grocery store here, but
awesome.
Tampa was a majority minority community for a very long time.
Yep.
It was really in I think the 2030s and 40s that flipped.
Mm-hmm.
There was still plenty of Anglo, English, Scottish, whatever people here before then,
mm-hmm.
And obviously the Germans. I don't think German is. I'm not part of the group of people who helped invent the Tampa Cuban. I guess I won't take credit for that.
Okay, one of the outsiders, I guess.
Yeah,
but So I think we're on an incredible growth pattern. Your group is trying to shine light on a new way to grow. Essentially. Mm-hmm. You could say LA did it wrong. Maybe San Francisco did it wrong. I don't know if I think the reality is that metropolitan areas have grown so significantly in certain areas in the United States as they have across the world, as they do throughout history. And as a government, you're kind of always playing catch up. There's certain areas that have done it the right way. I look at like Boston. Like, I love that city. I think it's extremely walkable. But I also understand that was platted out and really grew before the existence of a car.
Yep.
And New York is the same way, and Chicago really is the same way. And so I think that we're in a different world than we were in the 1800s, of course, in terms of city planning. But I think there's enough information out there with cases like LA that have had this crazy growth, and then places like Minneapolis that have changed their code, and other areas that have changed their code and adapted to this new, almost non-car centric, more walkable, more pedestrian friendly city. And people our age and younger, and even a little older than we are, appreciate that. That's the way they want to live. And I think if our local government is smart, they will take that into account. And hopefully the state does the same thing.
Yeah, I think we're all sort of a victim of our context, right? Like, we were born into the era that we're born into. I think part of being an optimist about housing and being somebody who understands why it's important to say yes. And this is part of the culture that needs to change. We were talking about historic preservation before we got started here. And the history is so important. Tampa developed before the car. We had streetcar suburbs before there was a car. I talk to my grandparents all the time about how they used to go downtown on the streetcar to go shopping. They go to the movie theater, they go to the Sulphur Springs, they go to the pool on the streetcar without a car, and they walked everywhere, or they rode their bike everywhere. It was their generation who helped tear that down in the city of Tampa. I mean, if you go to any American city, America had phenomenal world-class cities that today we look at, someone may or may not like Paris, or any given example. Everyone can criticize any city, but if you go and look at the walkability of your ideal city in whatever place you envision your ideal city is, Tampa had Tampa had a little bit of that, but the United States had that. I mean, St. Louis was a phenomenal city as far as walkability and density and transit 150 years ago, or maybe 100 years ago. This like idea that we can't have dense housing or we can't have transportation, that the car is the end of everything, is a very short experiment in the history of like human cities. I mean, it's been less than 100 years that the city of Tampa has developed in that way, and we found out that it's not really working super well. Like, there are some things that are good about it. I don't think we should ban cars, right? Like, nobody's talking about banning cars, but why are we subsidizing car infrastructure at the expense of people who can't afford cars? There's a conversation to be had about that for about 30 or 40 years, when we built all the highways through Central Avenue and Ybor, where we just forgot that there were some good things about what those neighborhoods could be. There was some racism. There was some very, mean-spirited stuff.
And this isn't a Tampa issue. This is every city, almost in America issue.
Yes. I mean, it's important to talk about the Tampa context, but you also have to talk about the broader national and international context.
Tyler, can you pull up our Instagram real quick? Just 2 posts I want to show. The first one is that streetcar grid network we put up. We talked about it on the podcast, which we'll release after this one, but I just want to show the viewers. So scroll down, keep going. It was the street grid network right here. So this first picture is a picture of the Tampa streetcar network. I believe this was from 1914. Yeah, 1914. You're right. It approached every single neighborhood essentially in Tampa, from Sulphur Springs all the way down to Ballast Point. This also showed other streetcar networks in Florida. You have Pensacola, Key West, Jacksonville. Key West had a streetcar. Key West had a walkable streetcar city-style setup. Look at Jacksonville, big streetcar network. I want to say Tampa's was the largest in Florida. Miami essentially developed, I think, right immediately after this in the 20s. Kind of started to blow up, Art Deco era, all that.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, look, we had it before. Obviously, this is pre-highway. This cars existed, but they certainly were not the main form of transportation. I've asked a few people, I've brought this specific map up a couple dozen times just to various people, and I've actually brought it up on the show before, and I say, if this existed, would you take it to work? Like, would you take the streetcar if there was a stop in your neighborhood to downtown for dinner on the weekend?
I mean, who would say no? I mean, I don't know. I'm in my own bubble, right? But everyone I know would say yes.
Me too. But I think in a weird way, we are in a bubble. We're young. I mean, obviously we have relationships with older people, but like I said in the beginning, I think that the younger generation wants this.
Yes.
And I don't know that our parents wanted it. I think our parents and our grandparents were more car-centric oriented, because that, the advent of the automobile in, I guess, 1915, 20s, and then the suburban era in the 40s, 50s. I mean, that's why they ripped up that streetcar network. And so I think their mindset was always car oriented. We've been so spoiled with it in a bad way. I mean, we've all sat in horrible traffic essentially our entire lives if you grew up in this area, and it has only gotten worse.
Yeah.
And no matter how many more highways they build or how many lanes they add, it'll continue to get worse.
Yeah.
So I think our generation is the one that's pushing back towards this type of lifestyle?
Yeah, there's definitely a generational component, and I don't fault older generations for getting into this when they did, right? Especially, I mean, this all happened in an era where we could actually build stuff, and I mean that in a good way and a bad way. I mean, there's good things about that, and there's bad things about that. We were subsidizing cars on a federal level, at a state level, and at a municipal level in a way that would be unfathomable today to do for transportation, for mass transportation. We're talking about in Hillsborough County privatizing HART. I mean, that's a conversation that people genuinely are having, but nobody's talking about privatizing I-4. And so even today, we're having this clear disparate, like this gap in policy on these two modes of transportation. The reason why, I mean, it just makes sense. You're going to invest billions and billions of dollars to build infrastructure when most people are starting to be able to afford a car. But by the way, not many people have cars. So like every time someone gets a car, they're like, holy crap, this is awesome. I can just go anywhere. I can go so far. Why would I live near downtown? Why would I take the streetcar? There's no cost. I mean, you have to think about the sort of microeconomic or behavioral economic component of this, which is like at the time, it was completely rational. It all made sense. This was phenomenal. I think that there were people early on who were like, why are we tearing up our cities for this? It's not sustainable. There were always naysayers, and even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Twice a day.
So it's hard to say who was really prescient and who wasn't, but people were saying
certainly the rhetoric.
It wasn't. Yeah, it's not like you couldn't foresee this coming.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I completely understand why, if you're in a world where the car works and the bus doesn't, you would lean on the car. And we're in that same place today. I mean, by the way, I'm fantasizing about a future. I always live in this world where, like, because I ride my bike around the city of Tampa. I almost never drive. And so I live in this fantasy land that not many people in Tampa get to experience, where I can go anywhere. I don't pay for parking when I go to a Lightning game. I don't deal with traffic when I go to a Lightning game. So I already live in this future that I'm envisioning where my grandparents grew up in. But today we have the situation where if you want to take the bus to the Lightning game, it's not better than taking the car. Taking the car is miserable, but taking the bus in Hillsborough County is worse, not because of the quality of the service, but because you don't know when you're going to get there. You don't know how close you're going to be able to get. And so there's
a list, right? I mean, you can't listen to your own music. You're going to be on the highway anyway.
Yeah,
right.
There's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't take the bus today in Hillsborough County, and I don't fault anyone for that either.
Yeah.
But I do think that a lot of people, if you could put this in tomorrow, if you could do what the people who built the highways could do to get transportation now in the city of Tampa in 5 years, I think that would be a generally supportive. Young people would be supportive of that because they've seen the cost that the car is imposing. And by the way, there are costs that they don't even know about. I mean, we subsidize the car in so many ways.
Oh yeah,
that people don't even think about on a day-to-day basis, that has negative effects on everything else in our society. I mean, when I go look on Redfin, I see all kinds of homes that I'm like, oh, I would love to live here. And I'm like, it's within a quarter mile of the highway. And I know that, kids who grow up within a quarter mile of the highway have asthma at a alarmingly high rate. And and you think that, okay, well, we're gonna have electric cars soon. And actually it's not the electric cars it's not just the gas that causes that problem. It's like material coming off of brakes, like there's all kinds of other particulate
tire,
matter,
rubber, etc.
Exactly. There's all kinds of pollution that comes out of cars that is not just going to be solved by Tesla. There's reasons why I still wouldn't want to live next to a highway. And by the way, big roads are dangerous.
They ripped it straight through almost every American city that exists.
Yep. But not equally, right? I mean, you look at the neighborhoods that were torn up by I-4 and I-75, and it was...
Well, they didn't go through the Palmacia golf course, if that's what you're saying.
Well, you know what? They didn't, but it is worth noting that the Selman Expressway is kind of close.
Yeah.
However, though, if you're new
that's
to,
straight through South Tampa,
but
you're right.
But if you're new to Tampa, you may be surprised. You may be like, oh, see, it was equal. We tore up Ybor and Central Avenue in West Tampa for the interstate system, but we also tore up these rich neighborhoods in South Tampa. Hyde Park, when they built that road, was not what it is today. A lot of the neighborhoods were not what they are today, but they chose that route intentionally. So,
well, people left the city, man. Can you look up real quick? Just probably Wikipedia would do it. You can do Tampa on Wikipedia. There's a demographics section. I just want to see the population of the city in the 70s. Really, urban renewal.
Right.
Is the cause of all this. People would just leave the cities. And again, it's not Tampa. This is just I think this was the American way of life, back then.
Oh, it's cars.
Cars and the advent of safer automobiles that can travel longer distances, meaning developers would build sprawl.
Yep.
The city's emptied out, man. I mean, you're probably right. South Tampa in the 70s might not have been nearly as extravagant as it is today.
No.
I mean, certainly even when I grew up, man. I mean, I grew up in Palmacia. I was on Concordia and San Juan in the 90s. We had a murder across the street. I mean, even in my lifetime, it's shifted around a lot.
I mean, and that's why the history is just so important to talk about. I mean, you cannot talk about these issues without talking about the history of every single neighborhood in Tampa and why every single neighborhood's history is important. I mean, there is this like old Tampa culture that is in those places, and I a lot of times I come in conflict with them over what I'm asking for, and but I have to give them credit. I mean, there are people who have been in South Tampa for generations, and while not all of that is pretty, they did it. They stuck to Tampa and they didn't leave, and they are an important part of why Tampa is what it is today. But they're not the only people who are in Tampa, and they're not.
That's exactly right.
There are reasons why people left. I mean, West Tampa is a phenomenal. I don't know, a very interesting story just to talk about why West Tampa turned into what it is today compared to Ybor turning into what it is today. I mean, they were basically the same place. I mean, different places, but very similar in 1930. And one is a neighborhood that people live in, and one is a neighborhood that is like a nightlife district, and it's changing a little bit now. But it's not. It wasn't really like the residents of the neighborhood are not the top priority. I mean, it wasn't the people who lived there that it existed for. It existed for the city, because the city put a lot of effort into making this our destination in the city. Why didn't we do that with West Tampa? And part of what happened in West Tampa is that everybody left. I mean, that whole community that made West Tampa. Moved just a couple miles north. I mean, into Wellswood was, I mean, that's an early one, but Town and Country. I mean, a lot of families that live in Wellswood and Town and Country have roots in downtown West Tampa before West Tampa was even part of the city of Tampa, which if your audience doesn't know about that, that's an important part of our history to know. It was a separate city, and I'm still trying to figure out who made the incorporation happen. And I would love to learn more about that history.
Yeah.
But, we had all these mutual aid societies in West Tampa that are nothing even similar to what they used to be because of the suburbanization of that community and everybody leaving all the important groups that existed there and all the communities that existed there. They're just gone now.
Yeah, so this was Urban Tampa Bay. They posted this in 2018 on their Facebook page. It's a picture of what was left of downtown Tampa in 1970 after the state bulldozed essentially half of the urban core to make way for 275 and I-4, that whole malfunction junction interchange. Look at that picture, man.
Yeah.
I mean, this was probably all homes and businesses, and it's just turned into lots. And in fact, today it's not much different. I mean, you have, I think that's Tampa Prep right there, south of the highway. High school is north of it. And then you've got kind of like North Hyde Park, as they say today, and then West Tampa kind of behind this photo. But this isn't, again, it's not Tampa. It's not like the people in Tampa and the government in Tampa was this nefarious organization that destroyed the urban core. This is a larger issue about urban renewal in America. But I think moving forward, the history is important because I think a lot of people recognize now that it was maybe a mistake. And the European model has existed for thousands of years. And if you go to Europe, it's a different experience going to their cities, even the small towns.
Yep.
You can hop on a train and go from city to city. And when you arrive, it's walkable and there's shops and restaurants and it's clean and you know, for the most part. And I believe that's what our generation wants, some sort of a mix between an American and a European model. I do believe that the car-centric lifestyle here is not necessarily going to go away on a dime.
No.
I mean, a lot of people still live in the suburbs, number one. Number two, we transport an incredible amount of goods and services through car and truck. But lifestyle is very important, and demand for that lifestyle will show up in developments. I think that's why Water Street is very popular. I think that's why Midtown is very popular. Some of these new developments that are walkable,
Right.
you know, they're popular for a reason. They're popular because people appreciate that type of lifestyle. Pre-recession, because I've probably followed, I don't know, real estate, I guess, since about then, since maybe I was in high school or so, maybe a little before. But the developments that would occur, actually, a great example of this is the Channelside, it was called, which was now Sparkman Wharf. So you go there today and you can see the water and there's restaurants and shops and it's kind of connected to Water Street. It's connected to Channelside. That development, Channelside itself on the water, was nothing. It was just like this, essentially a shopping mall with a parking garage attached to it. And it died. It was not popular at all.
I remember.
And that's an important lesson too, right? Like, people are moving towards a walkable lifestyle. It's expressed in new development. And if the city would take note of that and push zoning, infrastructure, and every other city service towards that type of lifestyle, I think they would be extremely successful, because that's what people want. They would see a reaction from it. And if they keep the same car-centric model, you're going to have a clash between the developer that wants to provide the demand and then, of course, the city that's inhibiting that demand.
Yeah.
But that's y'all's job, right?
Right.
That's where you are here to make change.
Yeah. And so that's actually a good segue into some of the policy issues that we work on. How the city has developed is not an accident. How the county has developed is not an accident. We say, I mean, you said earlier, the city of Tampa is sort of, they're not, their hands are not clean. I mean, they are the ones ultimately that are responsible for how the city of Tampa develops. And maybe FDOT comes in and says, we want to do X, Y, and Z. I can't speak for exactly how that worked in the 50s, but I can speak for how it works today. And we have people on the county commission who are wanting to widen I-275. And the city of Tampa is very clearly against that. It doesn't benefit residents. It just increases the likelihood that kids are going to have asthma downtown, while sidestepping the real issues about transportation. And so we have local issues that really, really matter. I mean, one of the stories that I like to tell is, you know, people ask, why is housing getting expensive now? And the city of Tampa didn't have zoning really effectively until 1942 or 1943. Tampa passed its first proper zoning code a year after the Supreme Court said that race-based deed restrictions were not enforceable. What that means is, I mean, the implication being that Tampa might have been using, you know, race-based deed restrictions prior to that. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, if you go and look in Riverside Heights and you go and look in Palmacia and other neighborhoods and you go look at the deeds on homes from 1912, 1915, there's covenants in there that say that a person of color may not own this home. You may not sell this home ever in perpetuity to a person of color. That's how we have segregated cities. That's after, after the Civil War and we ended slavery and we gave, theoretically, every black person in America the opportunity to buy and own land on their own right and their own terms. After the Reconstruction era, we have Jim Crow, and we had all these policies that were supported by people in the city, by developers in the city, by neighborhood associations in the city that created these rules that were intended to exclude certain people from certain parts of the city of Tampa. I mean, people don't know this, but we had the party that we were a one-party city. We maybe still are, but we were a one-party city for about 50 years. From the 1800s to the almost 1950. The city of Tampa was run by the white Municipal Party of Tampa. We were a majority minority city, but we disenfranchised enough people so that we had a party literally called the White Municipal Party of Tampa.
Literally?
Yeah, no, that's not a joke. Look it up.
Can you try to Google that, Tyler?
Look it up.
I've never heard this. So the party that controlled the mayor's office was literally
and city
called
council. Yes.
the what? The
White Municipal Party of Tampa. They have their own Wikipedia page. And Pam Iorio did a lot of research on this. This history is a really important part of, and this is why I was talking about West Tampa. West Tampa was incorporated in the city of Tampa during the prominence of the White Municipal Party of Tampa. So to me, it's a big question of why did a West Tampa, which was still a majority minority community, want to integrate with the city where they didn't have any kind of political power?
The White Municipal Party was a white supremacist political organization established in Tampa, Florida to eliminate African-American influence in municipal elections. Whoa.
It's not just
The
Tampa.
party produced unbroken series of mayors from 1910 to 1947. Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. I had no idea.
If you go back and look at the list of mayors in Tampa, you'll be surprised by some of the names probably.
Pam Iorio, who served as mayor, wrote about the group. Okay,
Yeah.
so she maybe was the one that kind of blew the lid off originally. She was mayor.
It was no secret. If you talk to somebody who lived in the city of Tampa in 1940, you know about the White Municipal Party of Tampa. It wasn't a secret cabal. It was the White Municipal Party of Tampa. I mean, there was no trying to hide it. That's just how city politics ran in the city of Tampa.
Yeah.
Period. Wow. And that's how, it wasn't just Tampa. I mean, a lot of cities, probably most cities in the country in 1930 were run by effectively a white supremacist political party especially in a place like Tampa, where Tampa was very unique because we were a majority minority city for a long time.
Well, that's what surprises me is we did have so many people from other places around the world that were here.
They couldn't vote.
They
weren't allowed to vote in a lot of cases. I
Right.
mean, if you dig into the racial violence history of Tampa, there are real stories that are being told today, but not enough people are hearing about it. Tampa is not a clean, squeaky place. I mean, anybody who's from Tampa knows, there's some not squeaky clean things about Tampa that these days we don't talk about anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a fun history to have, and it doesn't affect us so much, but the damage was done. And so going back to the zoning code, I mean, we passed our first proper zoning code a year after the Supreme Court said that you could not enforce a deed restriction based on the color of someone's skin. To me, that's not an accident. I mean, I don't have a quote in hand that says that Supreme Court ruling is the reason why we passed it. But if you go read the first zoning code, it specifically talks about black slums and the need to basically destroy them, to eliminate them, to get them out of communities that they wanted to make proper white communities. And that was a explicit goal of policymakers in the early 20th century. We see it ended around 47. That's kind of an interesting date, but we have basically since the mid-1940s had a zoning code that has incrementally changed from a first comprehensive zoning code whose purpose was in part, I mean, it's not the only purpose. It's not like it was like nothing in there that's actually meaningful except for racism.
Right.
There was real stuff in there, and it really affected how we developed the city. But the mechanism that was used is that they said, basically, here are neighborhoods that will be developed in a way that could be affordable to people of color, and here are neighborhoods that will be developed in ways that are not affordable to people of color. So you'll see a pattern, not just in our zoning code, but in across the country, this movement from explicit racial segregation to implicit racial segregation through explicit economic segregation. In other words, this idea that rich people should be entitled to live in their own enclaves, separate from poor people, in a society where race was the primary factor on whether you were rich or poor. And so the mechanism for doing that in the city of Tampa is to say, well, you have to own a lot of land to build a house. So in South Tampa, you have big lots. And if you go to West Tampa, you have small lots. So in West Tampa, you can buy a more modest home on a smaller piece of land that was attainable to somebody who worked in a cigar factory. If you worked in a cigar factory, you could not afford a 20,000 square foot piece of land and the types of homes that were being built on it in South Tampa. And so it was a natural consequence of that policy in the zoning code to say that rich people would live here and poor people would live here. And so it's not an accident that East Tampa is where is the heart of Tampa's Black community. It was a decision that was made by planners in the 40s and earlier who said that white people will live here and other people will live here. And we forget about that. We think that it's all about, God put us down on this earth where we are today. But he didn't.
Well, there is a fact that people of a certain culture and certain values kind of like to group up and live with each other, right? That's always just a natural human condition. But you are right. It is fascinating. I think that I lived in Swan Estates, and my neighbor behind me actually had grown up in the house. He's actually still living. I saw him recently. Awesome guy. He was in his late 80s. He grew up in the house, man. They moved from West Tampa with their family to, at the time, was the Suburbs, Swan Estates, which is essentially at the corner of Dale Mabry and Kennedy, the heart of Tampa.
Right.
But back then, that was the suburbs, man. You had to be pretty well off to figure out a way to get out there.
Yep.
And it from kind of what you're saying, it sounds like, those people that got out of West Tampa and got out of Ybor, out of just whether they saved their money and left or whatever, they moved to those more affluent areas of maybe Wellswood and North, South Tampa, South, all that way. Yep. Now, what do we do? How do we unwind this mess?
Well, I think it's important. There was some important part of what I was saying there that I left out, which is why is it unaffordable today? And I think that we're having this situation where the rules that we put in place to keep our society economically segregated 80 years ago basically are still in place. I mean, Pam Iorio, great that she was mayor, great that she was talking about this, but what did she do to change the fundamental underlying rules that describe how we can develop the city of Tampa? And I think what we're seeing today is that younger people, or there's a greater divide in wealth. Like the wealth inequality is becoming more and more severe. Whereas before it was really our minority communities that were already economically excluded from the city of Tampa's economic growth over generations. They were the victims, and they remain victims of that system. But we're seeing a situation where people that you used to think could make it in the city of Tampa are being pushed over that imaginary line that was.
I can't find a house, bro. I'm
right.
having a tough time buying something.
Yeah, it's hard. And so you have teachers now, people, not just teachers, you have nurses and everybody. I mean, everybody. And if you can't afford a home, if you can't afford a single family home on a large piece of land in the city of Tampa, you're not welcome here. And that's what the policy was 80 years ago. It's just that now when you say that, you're not saying it just to the black people, our black community in East Tampa. You're saying that to nurses of all, race, religion, creed, whatever, to all of them. You're saying that if you don't make $150,000 plus a year, we don't really know if there's a place for you here.
Even then, I mean, prices have appreciated so much that I don't even know if you could make $150,000 a year and have a choice of what neighborhood you want to live in Tampa.
Oh, absolutely not, no.
So it almost sounds like to me, if those people were around today, obviously if you were working in government in the 40s, you're probably gone. I mean, that was quite a while ago, but those people bit themselves in the ass because now a policy that was once written to maybe affect certain minorities, now it's affecting everyone.
Yeah, it's affecting their grandchildren.
It's affecting their grandchildren.
It's a ironic twist, I guess. Maybe some of their grandchildren benefited from inheriting, but the second son who didn't get the house they're not in that same position.
There's a lot of those folks, man.
Yeah, and so it's we just have to grapple with the reality of the history of how did we get here, and what were the specific rules that caused us to get there, and then what are the specific rules we can change. I mean, a very specific example in this case is we need to make it easier to have smaller lot developments. I mean, if you go and look at what cities are doing a really good job on housing affordability, there's a lot of things that I don't like about Houston. I don't want to move there, but they have very, very small lots, and they have a very diverse availability of housing that fits on those lots. I mean, they have single family homes that look like townhomes. They're separated. They don't share a wall. So if that's your issue, this exists, but it requires you to have small lot sizes, which by the way, Ybor has very small lot sizes. And I think a lot of people, especially young people, look at Ybor and say, I wish my neighborhood was a little bit more like Ybor so I didn't have to drive all the way to Ybor.
Yep.
And they're just little things like that we adopted in 1940 that were not just Tampa specific, that were very popular nationally, but were policies which are making housing more expensive. A story I like to tell is, this is actually really what got me into this whole thing is, and I was talking earlier about, housing justice is not a new issue, right? East Tampa has been talking about that for 100 years, more than 100 years. And there are people who have been talking about housing affordability for all time. What I saw, and the reason why I started this local chapter is, I live in a townhouse, and I saw in my neighborhood, I live in North Hyde Park area, that there were all these big houses that were being built, these McMansions basically, in North Hyde Park, which by the way is West Tampa. If you tell somebody who's been in Tampa for a long time that there's $1 million domain homes being sold in West Tampa, they would laugh at you. But the truth is that a new domain home in North Hyde Park is listing at over $1 million. And so I can't buy that. I'm not going to buy that. It's insane to think that I would even buy it if I could buy it. Mm-hmm. That's just beyond anything that I would accept in buying a house in Tampa. And so I'm like, but it doesn't make sense because you have a lot of folks like me who live in townhomes in that neighborhood, because there's a couple of them. Mm-hmm. There's not many of them. There's a couple of them. You have to wonder, what are the economic incentives that drive developers to build these stupid McMansions when they could be building much more dense housing with more square footage, with more units, which, by the way, smaller units get higher price per square foot generally. The economic model did not make sense to me. I'm not a developer. My day job has nothing to do with this, but I do have some intuition about how this works. It didn't make sense to me. And so I started looking into it, and I saw a couple of things. One is that we're not building very much housing. So there's something that's causing us to not build much housing. That's kind of surprising. Could that be related to the fact that McMansions are coming up on my block that should not, in my mind, be there? And the other is, eventually I found out that if I wanted to buy a piece of land and build a townhouse thing, like 3 townhomes on a 50-foot frontage or something, what would it take to do that? Well, you have to go through the zoning process. And I'm like, okay, well, let's go see what that looks like, right? And so I pull up the map. And this is actually kind of a fun, this might be something we could share. If you look up PIMA, P-I-M-A, Tampa, that's how I Google it. And you go to these neighborhoods. Our zoning code is a disaster. Our map is a disaster. Across the street from me, it's actually illegal to build townhomes, I found out. I live in a townhome on one side of the street, and across the street from me, it's against the law to build a townhouse. And so if you want to go build a townhouse, you have to change the law. You have to hire an attorney, one of 10 attorneys who basically run all development in the city of Tampa. You have to go to city council, and then you have to have somebody on city council, you have to have 4 people on city council agree that they should change the rules so that you can build a townhouse on that parcel. So if you go on the left, you can't see it, but you want to click existing land use for Tampa future land use. The one above it. And then you can unselect the bottom one. So,
so what are we looking at here?
So each color here represents a different type of different density that's allowed on a parcel. And you'll notice we have cross streets. It's a patchwork it's completely random, almost. It's almost completely random. Because...
How do they decide? Do you know, Nathan, how exactly they decide?
They do. I know exactly how they decide. They go to city council and they ask for a change, and it gets changed. It can change at broad strokes through the comprehensive plan, which, by the way, is happening right now. This year is like the year, almost once in a decade opportunity for us to make a difference on the comprehensive plan.
It's like a lunar eclipse.
The future land use map is defined in the comprehensive plan. So this map is something that is up for debate right now at city council.
So this is so important right now. This episode is going to air this Friday, which is, I don't know what date that is. What would that be? The 19th or something like that? But this is coming up at Tampa City Council. What's the date?
It'll be so Tampa City Council meets every Thursday, basically. So it's not this Thursday, but January 25th.
So when this comes out, the following Thursday.
Yes, right. On January 25th. I'm not expecting there to be fireworks, but if you're interested in learning about this issue, I would recommend you go on YouTube, by the way, watch it double speed, the recording of it the day after, and listen to the conversation that happens and understand and ask, does this reflect what you think the conversation needs to be? Because I started this chapter because when I was watching those meetings, I was seeing 2 hours of debate about a lot split in South Tampa. City Council meets basically once or twice a month to approve almost every single development in the city of Tampa. We have 150 people moving to the city of Tampa, or the Tampa Bay area, every single day based on the last decade of census data. That means that if an apartment complex can house, let's say, 300 people, that means every 2 days, Tampa Bay needs to build a 300 person apartment complex. And I ask people all the time, I'll ask even developers, how many of those types of apartments are being built today? Is it let's say 50 of them in Hillsborough County or Tampa, Florida? It's probably in Tampa, it's like 20 max. I would be shocked if it was 20. Maybe I'm wrong, but we need to have 2 done every single day in the Tampa Bay area. That means we have to have basically 150 done a year of large apartment complexes. And that's not happening. And especially in the areas where the growth is the most concentrated. It's not happening in the city of Tampa.
And like we talked about, you are not going to stop these people from moving here.
Right.
You live in an incredibly beautiful place that's conducive to business, that doesn't have a state income tax. People are going to move here whether you like it or not. I don't like it either. I was born here. I mean, I'm a true Floridian. You know, my parents got divorced. My dad's family lived in Tampa. My mom's in Sarasota. So from when I was 16 years old, when I first got a car, till yesterday, I was driving out of Sarasota back and forth. I've done that I-75 track 1,000 times in my life, and it is unbelievable. And I'm actually saddened to see the pastures and the beautiful forests we have here in Florida teared out and turned into suburbs.
Yeah.
So I don't like the growth either, guys, but we have to do something.
Yeah. Well,
like Nathan is saying, man, like you're saying, like the hopper is full. Like we need to be essentially more efficient about approving more development in Tampa, or else prices are going to continue to skyrocket and it's going to exacerbate this issue we already have.
It's in Tampa. I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, another story I love telling is, let's say 80 years ago or sometime in the past, Tampa used to be the heart of Hillsborough County. You might say it is today, sure, because it's in the middle. We have 3 municipalities, and we're competing against 2 very tiny municipalities. So yeah, sure, it
Temple
still is.
Terrace, Plant City, and Tampa.
And it used to be that Tampa had 3/4 of the county population. What happened in Tampa was what happened in the county. It was the county. Whatever happened in unincorporated Hillsborough County did not matter. We had streetcars, which were not really publicly funded at that time, but Tampa is where the decisions were made about what happened in the county and the growth. And the infrastructure that the city needed was decided by the city, because the city was the big dog. Today, the city is less than 1/3 of the county population. So when we talk about all for transportation, why did all for transportation not pass? It's because the city of Tampa has refused to grow while the county has grown. So the city every year is losing more and more power to unincorporated county on issues like transportation, where people in unincorporated county, rightly or wrongly, feel like they wouldn't benefit from investments in the city. But people in the city of Tampa who are saying, we can't build here, we're full, those people are going to unincorporated county and they're voting against your interests. So if you want more allies at the county level to get county policy that's going to help the city of Tampa, you need to be pro-growth inside the city of Tampa. But going back to this map, I just want to call out, like, yellow means very low density. But basically, the darker it gets, the more dense it's supposed to be. There's some good bits in maybe what we consider Hyde Park today, the north part of regular Hyde Park. But you'll see, like, I mean,
Courier City.
Just to give a basic example of like Rome. Well, maybe Rome's not a good example.
Well, north of Kennedy, Rome is a great example, really.
Sure. So like a perfect example, I'm not sure what the cross street is. It's just west of Rome. Like right there. If you go up, I forget what road that is, but one side of the street is one color and the other side of the street is a different color. That means on one side of the street you can do one thing, on the other side of the street you can't do that thing. And so if you can build a townhouse on maybe whatever road that is, if you can do it on one side, you can't do it on the other. And to me, that's just like
Havana, maybe.
Yeah, Havana. That sounds right. It just doesn't make sense, really. I mean,
no, it doesn't.
Like you should be able to do it across the street. And by the way, you can do it, but you have to hire a high-powered attorney. You have to pay a good amount of money, and you have to change the law, and then you have to go in front of city council, and they have to vote on it. They have to vote twice on it, actually, because you have to change the land use and the zoning, which are two separate votes that occur.
So the answer is you can do it, but there's just so much red tape. And what do? You have to have a hearing, and you have your neighbors come and say, I don't want them to build this because X, Y, Z.
Yep.
You have to fight them.
Yes, and anybody in the neighborhood can come and say no. And I appreciate that public input's important, that people should have participation in the development of their community. But here's the problem. And here's the bigger problem is that people in Tampa hate developers because of what developers do. A lot of developers do bad projects. And so people get mad about the bad projects. They don't want bad projects in their neighborhood, and that's fair. But the other part of it is that people don't have the opportunity to participate in their own development because it's so freaking hard. Like, you have to be a big money, high powered developer to do anything interesting in the city of Tampa.
Right.
And any little guy who wants to develop anything, it's not even the developers who are going to stop them. It's city council that's going to stop them, or it's the bureaucracy that's going to stop them. We need to make it easy for people who maybe, for example, your family, you inherit some piece of property that your family has had for 50 years, and you have two options. You can live in it, like three options. You can live in it, you can sell it, or you can try to redevelop it. Being a developer should not be no offense to career developers, but like, you should be able to develop property without being a career developer.
Yeah.
If you own a piece of land, you should be able to go to a builder and work to get that property developed in a way that is suitable for whatever your goals are with that property. And today, it doesn't make sense for somebody who's not super wealthy or sophisticated to participate in the development of the community that they've been in. They just have to sell it to somebody. And that person who doesn't live in that community is going to redevelop for them. So part of what we're trying to do is to make these rules make sense for regular people to participate in the redevelopment of their own community, and increase density. So anyways, I go to this map all the time. If you ever want to understand, development potential, something that kills me is we have developers who will buy land that can have dense housing, many units, 16. There's one by my house that I could have 16 units on it. And I was like, man, I wish I could do that. And then 6 months later, there's 3 single family homes on it. And
Well, it's less risky. I mean, from a developer's perspective,
yeah, it's their product.
To sell, to procure 3 buyers is less difficult than 16 buyers.
There's so much money left on the table, though. It kills me.
It's also the reason why you probably do see that high price point, because if you're a developer and you have to go through this painstaking process, you better make sure it's worth it on the back end. So I need to turn a profit. I'm going to have to sell it for a higher price.
Yeah, but if you have more units, you don't have to sell it for a higher price. I mean, that's the other part of
Right.
supply and demand. And part of the problem is because we make it so difficult to participate, the competition is very low. I mean, I'm not saying that it's an easy gig to buy land. I know there's a lot of risk that's involved, but we need to make it less risky to buy land. We need more people to participate so that people who have strong visions for really competitive products can win bids on land. Because right now we have companies like Domain who buy land that could be developed for a triplex, let's say, which is a very rare thing in Tampa. But they'll develop it as a single family home because that's the product that they do. But if we were in a market where it was easier for people to come together and buy land for a purpose, for a vision to build 3 units, that was economically more viable, that would be very good. I think that would drive up land prices just a little bit. We would result in much better projects overall. But the problem is that people who want to do good in their community can't participate in development directly. It's just too difficult. And so that's small potatoes. I mean, it's important culturally, I think, that we have a city that allows for that. But also, how do we get the mass number of units is a whole other piece of it. We need apartment buildings too.
Right.
We need development everywhere.
Well, we need to think about what we want to become or what we used to be.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, what do we want to be? Do we want to be this suburban nightmare like Los Angeles in 30 years? Because that's kind of what we're moving towards.
Right.
Or do we want to shift gears and do something more appropriate that is equitable among everyone? Like anyone in Tampa who has a decent job should be able to afford to buy their own place and live there, live close to work, etc.
And how are we going to fund transportation? I mean, there's so many components to this.
Do you know the details on? You said all for transportation failed, but we passed it. That we all voted and it passed. So what the hell happened? Do you exactly know?
Yeah, I know exactly what happened. Stacey White, and not just him, but he was a commissioner in Hillsborough County. Generally, the Republican establishment in Hillsborough County was opposed. There was a strong anti-tax interest that opposed it. I mean, they got 43% of the vote or whatever in that time, and they won in 2010. they sued and got it overturned on some very technical language. I won't opine on state law and how much I agree or disagree with it, but at the end of the day, the state Supreme Court used their power to say that it was not a thing that could be voted on by the voters of Hillsborough County. So even though the voters of Hillsborough County said yes to it, the Supreme Court said no, you weren't allowed to say yes to that.
That makes sense
So
from like a legal perspective.
Right.
I understand that, but I also would imagine that the government could look at the citizens and go, oh, they clearly want transportation.
Right.
Like even if legally they're not allowed to tax themselves, whatever, which seems, I don't know why you wouldn't be able to tax yourself. But yeah, I also read an article recently about the Florida legislature is going to come together and figure out what to do with the money. They already collected, I think, like $500 million.
Right.
So I believe that our governor has made it clear, or people in the legislature are trying to get the governor to use the funds for transportation in Hillsborough County in one way or the other versus a tax credit or something else, like actually use the funds for transportation. I hope that goes through.
Yeah.
We'll see.
The dynamics are interesting. I mean, I think it helps that I think it's more likely we'll get the money back because we could just not get the money back too. That was always an option.
Right.
Is that the state could say, well, we have other plans for this money. And so it's great that we're going to get the money back, but part of why we're going to hopefully get the money back is because we have a Republican county commission, and they're the ones who will decide how it's spent. And so they, I mean, it's politics, whatever. That's how the game is played. What I'm concerned about is that we're going to spend $500 million on expanding some highways in South Hillsborough County that are not going to improve the quality of life for people who live there.
Well, it certainly would benefit someone who lives in unincorporated Hillsborough and needs to go to the beach.
You think,
but how does that benefit the city of Tampa?
No, I don't even think it does. I reject the premise. I think that it will, for maybe 6 months, do that. But then we know about induced demand on roads, right? Like you widen the road, it does not improve the traffic. All it does is tell people, it broadcasts, we need more people on this road. We got room for you. Come here.
Hey, that road's less busy. I'll use that one.
Right, and then 6 months later, everybody's using that road, and we're back to traffic. So you're going to get
not
to the
even
beach.
Counting people moving here, by the way, too. This is not counting new vehicles on the road, which there's about 1,000 a day in Florida.
Yeah, you know the best way to improve traffic in the city of Tampa is to get cars off the road. And how do you do that? You pay for transit. And so that's not where the money's going to go. It's unfortunate, but it should go there. It really should, because that's what people voted on. Is most of the money was supposed to go for public transit.
What's the easiest route you see to a solution? It seems like completely overhauling this zoning. What's the name of it next Thursday? Not a zoning code.
Comprehensive plan.
It seems like completely redoing that is a harder goal to reach rather than like funding transportation or funding other issues. What do you believe is the quickest solution to any one of these problems?
I have big ideas. I'm not the city planner. I'm not on the city council. I'm not the mayor. What I want is not what's going to happen. But I will say that I really think that the mayor, to her credit, has done a good job of hiring staff who are doing their best to strike a balance between neighborhood interests and the real genuine concerns of young people and developers alike. Like, we need to make it easier to build housing for people to live here. And so there need to be some very specific big changes. I mean, we need to have things like, I would love to allow FAA height buildings all the way down Dale Mabry. I mean, we saw Midtown is basically that. Like, how can we duplicate Midtown down Dale Mabry? And why would that be controversial? I mean, I know there's an apartment development in Oakford Park, by Oakford Park off of Dale Mabry. That's, the neighborhood is deciding on right now whether they're going to fight it or not. We need this comprehensive plan is the moment for us to have a broader conversation citywide, saying we're going to pick once and for all, this is how we're going to focus development for the next 10 years. And we need to be looking at things like density down those main corridors. But every neighborhood needs to participate. I mean, there's this mindset in some neighborhoods that it's very reactive. And so something that I talk to neighborhood association leaders about a lot is if you can be proactive, this will go better for you, and it'll help us both get what we need. I mean, no neighborhood leader is going to go and say, I don't want young people living here, and I want housing to be more unaffordable, and I want my kids to live with me for the rest of their life. No one's going to say that. They want to solve the problem too. but the tools that can achieve that are not being presented to them very well. We need to be able to go to neighborhood associations and say, and this is part of the process, by the way, that is happening with the comprehensive plan update. It's not like somebody in a dark room is making this up. It's a very public thing that there's a lot of public meetings that a lot of public input has been gathered
For good or bad, yeah.
Yeah, and it goes both ways. They have a lot of data that helps them understand ultimately where they need to set these different policies on the spectrum of achieving our goals or achieving density and housing affordability goals and achieving the goals for people who have entrenched interests in their neighborhood association.
Yeah.
So we need more density. I mean, that's the big picture. And so how do we do that? We need to change the map a little bit. We need to make it a little bit more structured there. So we were just looking at it. We need to make some of the lighter color areas more dark, and that means more density is allowed there. In particular, neighborhood associations need to be proactive and say, this is the corridor that I think is appropriate for us to have this, and come to the table with ideas.
Can I stop you right there? Are there people on the other side that believe that density is not the answer? I mean, there's clearly a problem. The problem is affordable housing. It's a big deal when someone graduates from the University of Tampa. They have an amazing degree. They're super qualified. They're very ambitious. They want to start working, and they can't find a place to live, so they have to leave Tampa. Yep. That's horrible. We shouldn't let that happen. So there's an issue. Are there people that have other solutions to get to the same goal of solving that issue?
I think that there are good faith people on the other side of this issue for me who are just not as motivated to understand what is really driving it. And so that's a big part of our mission is education. We don't just go and call people names. We're a YIMBY, but that doesn't mean that everybody who opposes us, we're going to go and just say that's a NIMBY, that don't listen to them. We can't change everyone's mind. And really a lot of our mission is about finding new voices that aren't participating, who are disenfranchised or are new here and just don't know how to participate. But there are people who, for example, we hear the what is it called? BlackRock, or what was the other one? I always Blackstone. Yeah, sorry, BlackRock. Blackstone buying up all these homes, these big corporations buying up homes, and totally, that is some factor. That is a relevant conversation to be had. But if you go look at the investment prospectus for these organizations, for these funds, they'll say, what are the risks to our investment? Well, the risk is that the community decides that they want to build housing that competes with us. If you can develop a monopoly on land, that's a very powerful thing. If you're working with policymakers who are helping you keep that monopoly. And so developers are doing that. They're building made to rent places because they know that there's a limited number of units that are allowed to be built here. And if we can get if we can sprint to the finish line and own as many of those as we can, we'll have outsized power. But the flip side is, if the mayor says, I'm going to do everything I can to make it so that we never see housing scarcity again. The city of Tampa should not be a place that housing should be scarce for anybody ever again. We're going to build so much damn housing that developers are going to go out of business. That's the message I want to be hearing. That is not the message that Blackstone wants to hear. And so, anyways, that's talking about that issue. That's my take on it.
Yeah.
But there are people who sincerely believe that if we could ban corporations from buying single-family homes, that single-family homes would be affordable. The data just doesn't support that, and it requires a certain amount of research to understand that maybe is a factor. I'm not saying that that's not real. I'm not saying that that doesn't raise prices by
I think the problem is it's not real yet. I think their ambitions exceed the supply they already have. They want to buy a hell of a lot more housing than they already have now. And if we let that run amok and they end up owning 15, 20% of all housing, now there's an entirely new issue that's on the table that we don't have right now. I think you're 100% right. I totally agree. If you said tomorrow, hedge funds cannot buy any more single family housing, I don't know that it would have a huge effect. I think they only owe 1%, maybe even less than that, of all single family housing in the United States.
It does matter to talk about
negligible effect.
Well, it's important not to undercut my argument, but I think that, to be intellectually honest, if there's 100, it's not just about how many exist. It's about how many were on the market recently. So if they do buy 80% of the supply 1 month, I can see that having an effect on the next month's listings that agents are doing. It does matter, but the reason why they are doing it is because they know places like City of Tampa, they're targeting specific cities. They're not randomly picking places to buy homes at mass. They're going to places that have demonstrated that there is not political will to fight them on housing supply, that they can take up, they can develop a position that will give them outsized market power because they see that local people in that community are not willing to fight them and compete with them on owning homes. The city of Tampa is not doing enough to enable people to own homes. The thing we need to be doing is making more homes for people to own.
Right.
Not just, I mean, I love giving people, down payment assistance. I think those are important things that we can be doing. But we can't, if you go look at the housing needs assessment, which I'm not sure if is out, but it's been presented to city council, the shortage of housing, we're estimating like 50,000 units we're short on it. Meaning today, we need to build 50,000 units today to meet the need of the housing shortage that we have to make housing
if not
affordable
one
for
more
everybody.
person moved to Tampa, you're saying.
Yes, right. So ignore growth.
Wow.
That's 50,000 units today.
That's crazy.
And so there's this idea that, affordable housing is an issue that the city solves by spending money and building units. If you go look at the reporting about what the mayor's 10,000 housing, initiative has turned out to be, it's very, very difficult for the city to build housing with the tools available to it now. I fully support, personally, publicly built housing if it's done the right way, and there are definitely right ways to do it. And, the community land trust is something I'm really excited about that the city's doing on that front. But the city, think about it. If you have to build 50,000 homes at, let's say, forget the land cost, just the construction cost of $200,000 a unit or something. It's billions. It's like $8-9 billion that the city needs to do this.
And again, that's, a drop in the hat of when you add in growth. That's also 10,000 homes. How long does that take? We need them today.
Right.
At the end of the day, I think the point is the city can't take the burden. The city can't be the one to build all the housing. You have to let private developers build the housing. How do you do that? You make it easier for them.
You make it easier for them, but you also don't have to do giveaways completely. There needs to be. I
think we've passed that point.
So,
people are moving here whether we like it or not. I don't think you need to give developers any tax breaks or anything.
No, not even that. Well, the thing is, this is a big issue. Is how do we get? There are legitimate issues that I see as somebody who lives in Tampa, that I see bad development happening. Townhomes that face Florida Avenue downtown, to me, is a stupid policy outcome. The developer has a little bit of responsibility in that because that's their product, and maybe have different products that are better suited for that environment that the neighborhood wants. We have a lot of developers who are building suburban style developments in the downtown core that is making residents really mad and really opposed to new development. That is triggering a lot of people to be like, these stupid developers, I hate them, because there are developers who are doing bad projects.
Yeah.
And projects that are not compatible with not only what the neighborhood wants, but what the city needs. If you're going to do something bold and crazy, make it something the city needs. Don't just build the people who, especially the developers, like I was saying earlier, who will buy a piece of land that can have 5 units on it, and then they build 3, and the 3 units are really ugly and are not urban, they're a suburban context development in the middle of West Tampa.
Yeah.
I'm just you're hurting everybody else who wants to do the right thing with good projects.
Well, I think there's always the Toyota versus Ferrari argument. There's always a business that always appreciates a step up in quality. And so, they're always going to move in that direction. I think on Florida Avenue, it should have been retail.
It should have been.
I don't know the development you're talking about. We don't even have to mention it. But but Florida Avenue to me should be front facing retail. That's what it should be.
Yeah, and it's a policy problem because this map, if you go and look at Florida Avenue,
do they not require? I guess not.
You can't require anything. Basically, you can. You can't require density, for example. It's more up that way. But most of Florida Avenue has certain development entitlements. The other side of the river. Where that red line is Florida Avenue on the right.
So what is that? Community mixed use 35?
Something like that. It's commercial,
which is a good designation, right? I think we need more of that.
Yeah. So anyways, there's these roads that are having, basically single family attached in Tampa. It's called townhomes. That could be apartment buildings. And Tampa Heights is they're a very progressive neighborhood land use. I don't know if the developers know this, but Tampa Heights wants to grow. They're ready. They're YIMBYs. But they want it done in a way that contributes to their community. And it's not just about Ferrari, Toyota. It's like setbacks. Like I talk to developers sometimes. They're like,
It's thought and care.
Yeah, like they ask me like, what do you think the neighborhood wants? And of course, they also talk to the neighborhood and they hear exactly what the neighborhood wants. But it's like they want a walkable community, but the developer doesn't know how to do that. Like they haven't done the work because that's not what their background is. Like for example, there's going to be a Publix in the West River development.
Yeah.
And everyone's really excited it's going to be Publix, but it's a suburban Publix.
Suburban product. Yeah.
Yeah. The developer has never built an urban context product with how, like I went to that and I'm just like, why is this on a 6-story building with an apartment complex above it? And why are you leaving money on the table? I mean, there's no way that this is the best economic option for whoever's developing that property.
Totally agree.
They could have built 300 units on top of a Publix, but they didn't because they don't have the sophistication or experience to do it. And so we need to have developers who have the sophistication and experience to do those interesting projects.
Small stuff too, like even look at the Publix on Meridian in Channelside. Why doesn't that have another entrance on the south side of the street so that people can access it from that neighborhood, from Grand Central and South? Or the Publix on Howard Avenue. Why can't you access that from Armenia? There's so many townhomes being built with Onyx and East as a developer. They're bringing a bunch of nice townhomes, and there's that area is very densely zoned. Why don't they have an entrance on that north side of the street? It's all just concrete. So I think you're right. I think it's so much more than, hey, this is what you're allowed to build here. I think it's what quality is the city pressing a developer to build.
So the mechanism for that, this is getting technical, but hopefully your audiences can follow, is bonus density, which is if you're a developer who's done land use amendments, you know about that, or if you've looked into them. But we have had a very bad density bonus program that really has not. And what I mean by density bonus program is that if you do X, Y, and Z that benefits the community, the city will allow you to build 10% more units. The math on that, the back of the napkin math on a 10% bonus is minimal. It's not going to change the whether project pencils or not. And so the city really needs to identify, and I think that the plan that is being discussed, what the proposals that have been made by the consultant that will be feed into the comp plan update, appreciate that. Like if you want a developer to do a specific thing that maybe they don't have experience doing, because we don't have developers here that have a lot of experience doing a lot of the things that we need to be doing. For example, building a good Publix product that has entrances that face the right places. We need to incentivize them. We need to make it very explicit that these are the rules. And if you want to build a product that makes you a lot of money, you need to return a lot of benefit to the community with the type of development that you do. So right now the benefits are like, I think if you have enough affordable housing, I think you can build like 10% more units in most of the area, which means that if you have a 100-unit project, you can build 110 units, but you need to have like 30 units that are affordable, which means that those 10 new units, the 10 new market units, need to subsidize 30 non-market units. The math is it doesn't work. Developers don't do it. Or if you want to have like good urban form, and so you have more strict design standards that allow you to build more units, that's an area where we could say we want developers to build more units. This will be profitable for them, but we're going to guide them down this happy path that if they follow these urban design standards, and I don't think that we're actually going to do that in the upcoming comp plan, but I would love to hear people talk about it, that if you do X, Y, and Z well, you can build 100% more units. In other words, you can have
so like a game-changing bonus density.
It has to be very significant. And so, it matters on big projects, but it actually probably matters more for small projects. So we talk about missing middle and quadplexes and stuff like that. Like if you're building affordable housing in Palmacia, you can build a house that looks just like the house that's being built today. This McMansion that's 5,000, 6,000 square feet. And today it's illegal to build a quadplex there because we measure the number of dwelling units by how many stoves they have, basically. You can have one entrance with a quadplex. You can build the same building that we're building now, except with 4 units in there. If you could give some benefit, like for example, waiving parking requirements, if you or greens or like lot coverage requirements, if you make one of those units affordable, like those are the types of bonuses that we could be giving out to developers that make the project more profitable for them. And by the way, or maybe another example is like, if you can build a duplex today, but you make 1 unit affordable, then you can build a quadplex tomorrow with a higher FAR. So that would,
Density credit of some sort.
yeah, basically, if you build affordable housing or you do some good thing, then you're allowed to build more market units, which turns the project to be profitable for you and profitable for the community. The city is sitting on, this is how I like to talk about it. The city is sitting on billions, tens of billions of dollars of entitlements on land. In other words, if developers could buy from the city entitlements to build taller buildings, it would cost them, let's say, maybe a better way to put it is that developers would be able to build projects that are billions of dollars more in value. I mean, across the whole city, not one project that's billions. But if all the buildings that were getting built were 6 stories, like they are in any major city in Europe, it would be billions of dollars in value that's created by the city. But because we cap how much density we can have, that you can only have a single family home in 70% of the city of Tampa, you're not letting us build the other 6 stories of that development that creates value for the city. City council needs to unleash those billions of dollars of entitlements that's value for developers, basically, in order to allow, but in exchange for benefits that serve the city, meaning affordable housing requirements to do that, transit supporting requirements. I would love to do more stuff with trees, for example. I mean, if we can have, instead of palm trees, you're doing like trees that will actually contribute to the neighborhood or to the environment. Those are ways that we can require developers to do things. And the reason why I say bonuses a lot instead of just requiring it is in the state of Florida, you can't require anything.
Interesting.
If you have certain property rights today, the city cannot limit those property rights going forward. And so all the city can do is say, well, you have those entitlements that you have been sitting on when you bought that land. All we can do is say, we're going to give you incentives that say if you spend $200,000 or $5 million on affordable housing, we're going to allow you to build $10 million more market units. And so the new market units are going to subsidize the.
They can't require you to do something, but they can prohibit you from doing something.
They can prohibit you from doing something if you're already being prohibited. So they can't prohibit you from doing new things.
Can you pull up LoopNet, Tyler? There's a property, 100 years ago, actually, almost 100 years ago in 1926, my great-grandfather opened up a little hardware store in Ybor City. Back then we were kind of talking about the old days, when cities used to be very walkable in America. Mm-hmm. The corner grocery store was the thing to do. I mean, you'd walk down to your corner grocery store and you get your milk and eggs and whatever you need. Today, it's all by car, right?
Right.
And like we've talked about, that's changing. Wouldn't a really good way that I believe a lot of people would agree with is to allow small commercial community zoning within residential areas like a small corner grocery store? I mean, you can't do that in the city of Tampa today. Go to Hyde Park, go southwest. There's a little building for sale. That was actually our old hardware store. It's for lease in Ybor City. East, directly east, one more. It should pop up south right there on Watrous. You got to run soon? I don't want to keep you.
I can go for a little bit.
For sale. Yeah, pull that up right there on that corner. Look at this cute little shop, man. Right. Now, one day, this was built in 1905. This used to be a little studio. It was 6 total units, man. There could have been a little coffee shop, a little hardware store, whatever. Mm-hmm. So I talked to the broker because I was interested. And essentially the city has grandfathered in office professional use. So I could purchase this. I could have my little real estate office and podcast studio in there, but that's it. Why the hell would you not be allowed to open up a little coffee shop and sell milk and eggs to the walkable neighborhood of Hyde Park?
So one of the we talked about the comprehensive plan. That's this big thing that needs a lot of change and is going to be, probably controversial at the end of it. There's rewriting our zoning code top to bottom, which is another objective that we have in a project that's actually in motion with the city right now. There are little things that we can do here and there that really matter for small incremental development. And if you're interested in this type of stuff, you should be looking up incremental development. And Strong Towns is a big advocate that has a lot of great content about how little things that we can be doing to enable more projects like this. If I had to guess, probably the biggest barrier to doing something here is parking. we're asking city council this month to eliminate parking minimums downtown. Orlando's done it.
Orlando did it?
Oh yeah, Orlando's downtown business district does not have parking requirements for development. Our downtown business district does. A lot of really big cities now don't have parking restrictions.
And then Minneapolis was one of the first to.
Yeah, Minneapolis did it, 5 or 6 years ago.
Now, this isn't in the downtown core,
No, it's
though.
not. So this isn't affected by what we're asking for this month, but I just want that to be on people's radar. If you want things like this, if you want walkable, accessible amenities, you need to be talking about parking reform, which is part of, housing, like zoning reform, basically. The rules need to be changed so that we can build the things that we used to have that we really want back.
You've obviously been to a lot of these meetings, and I'm sure watched a few dozen on YouTube. Mm-hmm. If I bought this building and I wanted to go through with that, what would I be up against? Who do you typically see come to these meetings and rally against these projects, and what's the fear? Like, what are they saying?
It is... If you have a friend of yours who you really trust come knock on your door and tell you that something really scary is happening in your neighborhood, would you go and support them in fighting that thing?
Mm-hmm, of course.
There's a lot of very good-natured people on up and down the ladder of NIMBYism in Tampa, let's say. Neighborhood associations are forces for good in general, but that is really the sort of organizing space for NIMBYs, for people who want to oppose changes in their community, even when there's probably broadly a consensus that's a good thing. The thing is that people don't show up to say yes. I mean, that's what the point of our group is to
Right.
get people to understand, like, there are people showing up to say no, and we need people to show up to say yes. And so you might have 2 or 3 people who, for example, specifically, parking's one of these things. Like, there might be a requirement that, like, they have to, in order to do something with this, you have to go get special rules to waive parking requirements for whatever you're putting in here. And by the way, the parking requirements are really ridiculous. If you go and look at how they're determined, like, the number of parking spots you need is different based on whether you're a haircutting salon or a corner store. And if you're a haircutting salon, it depends on how many chairs you have in your hair salon and who picked the ratio of how many parking spots you need per chair. And why is it relevant for this walkable community? It's not. So the rules are arbitrary; they're made up, and so you still have people who don't really appreciate that. They don't really know the background. All they know is that this place is going to add traffic to their neighborhood. People may come from outside of their neighborhood to go get haircuts or to get coffee here.
Right.
And if they can't find parking out front, they're going to go park 3 blocks down. For me, that's great. To me, I see that as a community that's flourishing. And if you don't want people to make parking harder. Don't make business harder, right?
Well, wouldn't the developer and the business owner really be the one taking the risk? Like, this might be a bad example, but
this is a great example.
Well, it's a good example for a little small, maybe grocery store or a community market to walk to. But for an apartment complex in the urban core, right?
Yep.
If I was going to build something like that and I went to the city council and I said, look, I'm the developer, like, I'm the one taking the risk to believe that the product I build and the people that live there are going to choose to walk, bike, take the trolley, whatever. Shouldn't the developer be the one to accept that risk and move forward? Like,
I think what I'm excited to have happen, I'm excited to get rid of the parking minimums in downtown business district. If that doesn't happen this month, I'll be very disappointed.
Yeah.
Or if that conversation doesn't accelerate dramatically, I'll be very disappointed.
Is that coming up on Thursday too?
I'm hoping a motion will come. We've been asking for one for a long time. But anyways, my hope is that we will see one soon.
Okay.
And what I'm really excited about is that we're gonna eventually eliminate parking minimums in our downtown business district. And nothing is going to change. It's going to be exactly the same as it was. And maybe we'll have some developments that are, instead of 30%, 3 stories of 10 being parking, it maybe is 2 stories of 10 being parking. Developers cannot get projects financed without parking, especially in the city of Tampa, where there is no project that doesn't have parking. So you can't demonstrate this is a financial model that works. It's not just the developer taking a risk, it's the bank taking a risk. There's a lot of stakeholders who are taking that risk. And so that will already be factored in regardless of the regulation, which is why we don't need the regulation. All it does is set up arbitrary rules that make it more difficult for people who want to do more experimental things And we don't need that because we need experimental things to get more housing done right now.
Yeah.
And so you're right that there's a risk. I'll advocate for the other side. I'll tell you exactly what they'll say. And they'll say, well, just because you build it and there's no parking doesn't mean that people don't have cars. And so people will go park on the street, or they'll go pay for the other parking garage, and it'll make the other parking garages more full. And okay, maybe those things are real, but like there's more housing that's more affordable. And maybe we should be making parking in the downtown business district more difficult in general. Like, how can we get people who don't want to own a car to live in this building in particular? There's a lot of other policy angles that need to happen from that conversation, but for a lot of people, it just stops at, I have a good parking spot downtown that I don't have to fight for, and I don't care what the benefit to my community is. I never want to lose that street parking, that free street parking that I've been having. And that's just like a very selfish mentality. And then it kind of spreads, unfortunately, by word of mouth, where you have a lot of people with, especially in some neighborhoods, a lot of free time on their hand because they don't work. And so they go knock on doors saying, this neighborhood is going to be destroyed if this thing happens. And then lo and behold, they get 50 people going down to city council fighting this thing. And I'm not saying that people don't genuinely feel that way. What I'm saying is that they're not balancing the interests of everybody in their community. They're worrying about their specific individual interest. They're concerned about fear, and they're not looking at it with like a sort of a yes mentality, frankly. Like we need to have a cultural shift around this stuff. And that's what, saying yes is about. It's about leaning into what could be good instead of what could be bad, that frankly, there's no evidence that it will be bad.
Right. Well, there's always going to be a effect beyond your control. I mean, there's always going to be a positive or a negative externality to whatever you're doing.
Right. There'll be winners and losers. I mean, the person who gets free parking on the street that never has to worry about whether they're going to find a parking spot on the street for free.
Yeah, good for him, but at what cost?
Right, right, exactly. So the cost is, if for example, we see all the time, we'll have 10 people show up to a meeting to reject an apartment complex that could house 300 people. Where were the 300 people represented in that decision?
Right.
And it's just not, it just is not, it doesn't make sense. That's not how you run a society.
What is the rhetoric in between the council members? Obviously, I don't know how it really works in Tampa. Like, are they allowed to meet behind closed doors?
No.
They're not allowed to meet behind closed doors?
They can't talk about issues behind closed doors.
They can't talk about issues behind closed doors. So what is the rhetoric when they're up there in the chambers and they have 15 people, using this as an example, we don't want a corner grocery store. Is the council very, very in that bubble, in that room, listening to those people more so than thinking about all of these other externalities that you're talking about? Like, why wouldn't a city council person look at this and go, this is a fantastic idea, a little corner grocery store. And by the way, guess what? All the people that walk to this little grocery store are now not going to be in the car driving to Publix on Dale Mabry. We just took cars off the road.
Yeah. Here's, man, I could talk about just that question for hours.
That's kind of the whole question, right? Isn't that the whole
this is a political issue. I mean, that's the number one thing that I think people need to walk away with. If you're involved and if you're not involved already and you want to have change that causes us to have a more walkable community that pays for transportation, that's better for the environment, that gives kids less asthma, that saves trees and keeps us from draining our swamps and our rural and farmlands. Like, if you care about any of those issues, and you don't have to care about all of them, if you care about any of them, this is a political issue in the city of Tampa and the county commission that you can make a difference on. And so the issue ultimately is, the same problem. I mean, it's democracy, right? Mm-hmm. Big fan of democracy, but there's some critiques that we can have.
For sure.
I would say, and this is
it's a lot of pressure though on them.
Oh, it's hard.
That's a lot of people right in front of you who are probably your voters that are saying, "Don't you dare do this because X, Y, Z."
Yeah, my point of view. This is a very cynical take, but I tell people this all the time. I truly, I see this dynamic apply to everybody, but how they vote changes. I don't think anybody's better than anybody else on this. Well, I'm not saying everyone. No, some people are better than others, but I won't call out names today about who's good and who's bad. But they're all subject to this dynamic. Let's say the system, our local municipal political system, creates this dynamic where city council's real job. They're a local zoning board. That's really their most important function. People think that there are all these other things that they're going to fix the city, this and that. Like, the main thing that they're voting on in general are contracts and development. And people don't pay attention to the development stuff very much, except when it really matters. So you have this dynamic where, like I said earlier, there's probably like 10 or 15 lawyers or law firms that represent almost every project that happens in the city of Tampa. And sometimes they win and sometimes they lose. And their relationship with city council is very important. So when they're presenting city council, it's very important that they have decorum, that they are professional, that they provide a good case for why a project needs to get built. It also helps that they contribute to their campaigns. And sometimes it hurts when a city council member fights a project that matters for them. Maybe the next time they won't contribute to that person's campaign, and money matters a lot, even in local elections. And so if you go and look, to me, because it's almost random to see who votes for what when. I think that there are good candidates. There are good people in city council who will more consistently vote in the interests of, in my interests, I guess I'll say, that we earn their vote inconsistently, but some people more consistently than other people. What I see is this dynamic of, like, if nobody's there to oppose it, the developer generally can do what they want. And that way they can go in the next campaign cycle and say, look at these things that I made happen for you. Maybe they don't say that. I don't know. I haven't run for office, but it's easy for me to imagine. And then the flip side is that when a neighborhood association comes out and opposes a project, even if it's a developer who's important for them politically, let's say, if they can demonstrate value to the neighborhood association by fighting the project that time, they can then go in the election and say, I'm a neighborhoods guy. I support neighborhoods through and through. And so, like, if a neighborhood says no, I'm gonna say no to that project. And so you have this dynamic where, at the end of the day, what I think the incentive structure is, I'm not saying that every single decision is driven this way, but the incentive is that you say no to projects when the neighborhood shows up, and you say yes to projects when only the developer shows up. And then during the election cycle, you get to go to everybody and say, look at the value that I demonstrated to you during my time in office. And for that reason, the reason why I think that's really important is that we have a system where city council votes on every single project. And since city council votes on every single project, every single one of those projects is an opportunity for them to demonstrate value to their constituents. And they will, we need them to give up that power. That is basically, in my mind, the most corrupt system you could possibly have for for city planning, basically, is to say that every single project needs to be politicized. We need to have a set of rules that applies to everybody all across the city. Maybe there's special contexts like historical districts, and you know, there are special contexts that could exist. But the fact that every single project has to be politicized, that it has to be a battle between developers and neighborhood associations, both of them the two most important factors for a city council campaign in an election, by the way, that has less than 5% turnout. The system needs to be changed. And there's a couple ways of changing it. One is you can move the elections to November. That'll change things a little bit. What we're really focused on for affecting change is that we need to bring new voters in. We need people who move to Tampa, who live in Channelside now, to sign up for our mailing list and to listen to us when we tell them who to vote for, because what we're asking for are candidates who are going to build more housing options for people like that, for people who can't, for young families that can't find that don't want to own a car, who want to have, be a one-car household and live downtown. That's not an option for almost any family. We need to have the people who want that to be voting for candidates who are going to make that happen. And we're the only 501c4 that I'm aware of in the city of Tampa that's trying to do that. We need to bring in new voters, basically. We need different voters. It can't be the same people, the same 5% of people who have run the city of Tampa for the last 20, 50 years. We need a different set of voters. And so that's sort of the political angle that we have on this.
Yeah, it's an America problem. It trickles up the ladder all the way to the presidential election. I don't think it's any secret anymore. That's the good news, is there's been a lot of light shed on elections, and corrupt is a strong word. I wouldn't say our government's corrupt here locally. I would never say that. But like you said, there's a incentive structure that does not benefit the young people, certainly maybe not even young, anyone in this city.
If you're not one of the 5% who votes in the spring election, your interests, you should not expect your interests to be represented on city council. And that's the issue, is that we need the 95% of people who, we have over 50% of the people in the city of Tampa are housing burdened. There is genuine action on city council for housing affordability, But the idea that they're going to somehow change that macro number with the types of stuff, I can confidently say this out of complete frustration. I have not seen the city council or the last city council. I mean, this city council, we're still a little bit new. So I'm giving some of them the benefit of the doubt. But last city council, I didn't feel like they did a single thing for affordable housing besides put money into it.
It's such a big issue, though.
And
I mean, the mayor talks about it. They all talk about it.
And the mayor hired good staff. But yeah, the mayor has her own responsibility.
Affordable housing.
Yeah. It's easy to win an election talking about it. You have to talk about it. But the 5% of people who voted are not the people who are affected by it, frankly. I mean, you have candidates who it's a secret. It's an open secret now that like you don't need anybody except for voters south of Kennedy Boulevard to win office citywide in the city of Tampa.
Yeah.
And it's not the people south of Kennedy who are housing burdened. I mean, young people maybe who are stretching themselves to live there are, but that's not
why
most of the
people are paying
there.
$1 million to live where you're at, north of Kennedy and south of 275.
Because they can't afford to live south of Kennedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why people are moving to Tampa Heights and paying $1.5 million because they can't afford $2.5 million in South Tampa.
Right. Exactly.
It makes sense. It's pushing people out. It's horrible.
Yep.
You expecting a fight Thursday?
No, I'm not. I think it's early.
What's the process, just real quick? So it's like people can come and say their piece about
at city council.
Like the issue on Thursday where we're going to do the comprehensive plan.
It's going to be presented. I mean, it's a long process. I don't want to like tell people that like there's like the end of the world is being decided that Thursday. It's an important opportunity for you to be engaged and to communicate what you want. I would hate for people on that dais at city council to listen to the presentation, and then if a vote is being made, I think that basically what's being decided on is like, do you guys agree with what we basically city staff is going to present? Here are the changes that we think we heard you ask for last time we presented this. We're going to kick off the process to like actually write the changes. So like this is the beginning of like we're going to write we're going to make the changes, and then in 6 months or in 8 months or whatever, you guys are going to vote on those changes officially. And so this is the kickoff for that like 6 to 8 month process that's going to actually result in the law being formally changed. And when we talk about how do we want to start off, do we want to start off from a position of like status quo and like nobody really cares about this, ho hum, whatever? Or do we want them to feel going into into that section, that part of the day of the agenda, that there's a real consensus among a certain important set of people that we need this type of change? And so, I would love to see during the discussion that there's enthusiasm about the big change that's needed, as opposed to discussion about, for example, well, we have to be responsible with neighborhood character. Like that's actually what's important. Like that's not if that's what we hear, then we're in trouble. And you better be, as an investor in the city of Tampa, if you are concerned about the trajectory and the seriousness of our local government, if you go and watch that meeting on Thursday and the conversation is not about how they can fix the affordable housing crisis through our comprehensive land changes, instead it's how can we preserve neighborhood character and keep Tampa what it has been, like we're in a lot of trouble because this is a once in a decade opportunity, really. I think there's a way to do both. I think that there are aspects, I tell people our character is in the people, not in the buildings. It's the people who are here that make Tampa what it is. Yeah. And the idea that it's a front facing garage on Wastrous Avenue that makes Tampa special, I disagree with that completely. But if you want to fight for that, if that's what you think Tampa's about, is about having a suburban development within walking distance of a downtown business district, you can make that statement, and I'm not going to change your mind. I'm going to go find other people who disagree with you, and we're going to go vote and make this different. Let's roll. I like it, man. Lastly, too, you gave me a great book, which I just finished, Arbitrary Lines by Nolan Gray. Super good book, and it details out all the reasons why this whole country needs zoning reform. I think there is a happy medium, though, because I do feel for the people that have lived in the area for a long, long time. I mean, the glue factory example in the book is fantastic. Like, no one's advocating for a glue factory to be placed in a residential area. Right. No one's advocating for a strip club to be placed on, the corner of Swan or, in a neighborhood like that.
there is a happy medium. I think it can be achieved. It's just about the message, man. And I think there's a lot of fear-based argument on the other side. And I think your side, just from an outside looking in, it seems like you guys are pressured, because I'm included too. I'm trying to find a house. You're pressured by affordability. Like, it's so much more of a crisis for us, producer Tyler included, and all the young people in the city trying to make it, than it is for them. You know, they have a status quo that they want to maintain, whereas we're trying to live our lives and work and buy a house and live the American dream. And in some ways, they're standing in between that. And I think if they knew that, they would see that what you're advocating for isn't as scary as it looks maybe on paper.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, the image you just evoked. I mean, I love saying this. Like, there's this like unintentional lifting of the ladder where South Tampa used to be affordable, and people made their fortune on growth in the last 20 years. I mean, people really put hard work into making Hyde Park what it is today. It was not that 30 years ago. No. And they deserve a lot of credit for that. But credit, they're not entitled to lift the ladder. You know, we have policy rule, like the system that's in place, that was always in place, has always sort of spelled out the possibility that, like, you know, this could be something different. And all cities have faced that through human history. Cities change over time. And so I appreciate that that are existing stakeholders and like their interests need to be served, but there are other people whose interests need to be served. It's democracy. We need to balance interest. Unfortunately, like I said, 5% of people in the city of Tampa vote for the city council elections, and South Tampa is the biggest density of voters. And so people who sort of got theirs and lifted the ladder, unfortunately, are some of the most powerful voices in the city of Tampa. And I don't mean that just in terms of, you know, they're buying politics. I don't mean like that. What I mean is that they're the ones who vote.
Right.
And
literally, they're the ones who vote.
And they get their interests represented. And anyway, so that they should get, you know, there should be compromise. I mean, there should be parking management that is not just, we don't have to just like throw away all the rules. There are very smart things, targeted good policy. I mean, that's really what I'm about. I'm about what is good, proven policy that works to achieve our goals. And there are things that we have not done. There are so many things that we have not done that because of political paralysis, we seem to be unable to do. There are so many things that we know work that we can do.
Because other cities have done it.
Because other cities have done it. And because they just make sense, frankly. And if your concern is parking, like, let's talk about parking. Let's not talk about keeping kids out of ADUs. Let's talk about parking, and let's focus on parking, and let's come up with parking solutions. But unfortunately, people just think development is the beginning of the end, and everything comes from development. And it's a little bit true, but there are specific policies that we can be talking about that mitigate some of the concerns. For example, if you have neighbors who are loud, let's talk about how do we regulate like noisy neighborhoods. Let's not just like say that you can't have neighbors.
Right.
Right. You know, like let's be focused about like the real problems instead of just attributing all the problems to this upstream thing, which we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, that's really what it is.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, it's children who are suffering. Anyone who's listening who, you know, has a kid who is graduating high school soon or college, and they're waiting for the day when their kid comes to them and is like, I need to stay with you for a little while. I got a job in Tampa or whatever, or I graduated UT and I'm coming back to move in the house. You know, either you're going to pay for their housing or they're going to live with you. And if you don't come up with a plan for them to move out, like, you should be asking, when are they going to move out? Like, there's so many people who I think are in that category of like, they have kids and they want things to be good for their kids, but they're not really thinking about, like, if you don't make Tampa a place that your kid can live in, like,
yeah, what are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing? And you got to be thinking long term, and people aren't always doing that. And so that's one thing I just love when I have that conversation. I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right. My kid, I don't know how they're going to afford to live, and you know, because they pay $600 a month for their mortgage, and they think that that's the cost of housing. I mean,
figure it out. I did. That's the rhetoric, right?
Right. I mean, but even the ones who aren't like that, you know, they're opposing it, and they're just like, oh, I'll just support my kid indefinitely, but they don't know what that means. I mean, they just think that they will figure it out. But if you don't make a system that works for people, it's not ever going to work out. I mean, you don't accidentally have a good like community. It doesn't happen by accident. You need good leadership. You need good incentive structures. You need all these different things that that make a system work. And if we're not serious about building them, then Tampa's doomed. And I don't think that Tampa's doomed. I think that we have a bright future. We have a lot of opportunity, and it's going to take some bold action, some big change, and some growing pains for folks who thought that they didn't have to grow anymore.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we have an incredible place, and with the right growth management and the right policy, and if we all work together, the city could be 10 times more incredible than it already is.
Definitely.
So I appreciate you coming on, man. We got to wrap up.
Yeah, let's do it.
Tell people where they can find you, follow you, and get involved.
Sure. So you can follow us pretty much everywhere. YIMBY Tampa, YIMBY. If you can't remember that, it's yes in my backyard. And YIMBY Tampa on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Threads too. Though we're not posting there very often. If you want to, I got a mailing list. Go to our website, sign up for the mailing list. If you want to really support what we're doing, you can sign up as a volunteer member, or you can sign up as to contribute to our organization. It helps us find little things that we do. We're people powered, not money powered, but a little bit money helps with certain aspects of our organizing, and we need more people. I mean, we need more voices to be represented at City Council, and that's a big ask, and it's not just about changing minds, it's about getting people who are listening to this podcast who maybe didn't even vote to appreciate that in the city of Tampa, there's 300 people who walk in City Council every year. Make sure you're one of them. I mean, you can make a difference in the city. It's not that hard.
So YIMBYTampa.org, and then this Thursday in the City Council chambers, do you have date, time, everything? I mean, I know you have a date.
City Council agenda, if you look it up, I mean, if you just follow us if you want to see more details about any kind of organizing that we're doing around it, any more details that folks might need to know.
It's a pivotal year, sounds like.
It's a pivotal year. I mean, there's a lot of small meetings, so we need folks who are ready who are in it for the long haul and want to participate in major change. We need to send a clear message that there is electeds will be rewarded if they do the right thing. I mean, that's really what it needs to be. And so the more voices we have dangling that carrot, the more likely we are to get the change that we need. It's a political problem. Hate to say it. I hate that it's political, but unfortunately it is. Luckily, it's not too partisan here in Tampa.
Luckily.
I mean, at the state level, anyways, we didn't talk about the state level today, but
that's the next podcast.
That's the next one. We'll talk about Live Local sometime, but.
All right. Beautiful. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Bye, everybody. Thank you guys for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like it. Check us out on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, give us a comment, give us some feedback. We want to know how we're doing. Thanks for watching. Bye, everybody.